Welcome to the town of Fishkill. On October 14th at 2:30 in 1897, the Daughters of the American Revolutionary War dedicated a war memorial to Fishkill's war dead at this intersection. 128 years later, we're going to commemorate that marker, and I'd like everybody to rise to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. The Hopewell Junction branch of the American Legion, our town historian, Mr. Bucari, our Putnam choral, and our Lakeside honorary choral that's going to sing right after this. We have Virgil Capillari, our Veterans Committee Chairman, Assemblyman Beham, who's here representing the Assembly, our Assemblyman, and we got Nick from Senator Rollison's office, Councilwoman Bardini, Town Clerk Rebecca Tompkins, Councilman Brian Rye, Town Highway Superintendent Carmen Estevan, our Deputy Supervisor Harold Brilliant, and I think I've gotten everybody. I missed anybody? All right, with that, we'll start with our first ensemble. Ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red of guns bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
That was awesome. Thank you. Where's our chairman? Chairman? This is Virgil Capillari, our chairman of the Town of Fishkill Veterans Committee. He want to say a few words.
Right. Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Town of Fishkill. A special thank you to American Legion Post 1758, who always makes it out to represent. We appreciate it. Thank you to all others in presence. Without delving too much into their portions of the speeches, none of this is possible without the people coming out to remember, to honor, and to teach. While the Melzinga chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution dedicated did their first dedication in the late 1800s, lo and behold, the Spanish-American War was only around the corner. Fishkill has certainly had its significant contributions to every major war and conflict. It has been a home. Per capita-wise, our town has one of the largest veteran presence in the county. We would be remiss if we didn't thank the town for continually reminding us, because after all, without you, none of this is possible. For the fallen and for the deceased, and for the active, Remember, our armed forces do not have special unions. They do not have overtime pay. All they have is the American people. So on behalf of the Fishkill veterans community, on behalf of all veterans, thank you and God bless this nation.
Thank you, Virgil. For many years in the town of Fishkill, the men couldn't accomplish what the women did by erecting this marker to our Revolutionary War dead in Fishkill. And this date is special throughout Fishkill history. On October 14th in 1967, the Historical Society did a speech. And today, the women in Fishkill have come so far. We have a lady town board member and a lady town clerk who are going to read that speech. Councilwoman Bardini, town clerk, Rebecca Tompkins, please come up.
Thank you, Ozzy. So, as Ozzy said, I'll be reading, both of us, Becky and I will be reading from Radford B. Curdy's speech. Radford B. Curdy was president of the Fishkill Historical Society and director of the Fishkill Foundation. And the title of his speech, which he made near the old church, is "The Breadbasket of the Revolution, Past and Future." Just an example how Fishkill has come such a long way. No horses and carriages today. On a brisk fall morning during the early years of the Revolution, a day much like today, a detachment of Sheldon's 2nd Connecticut Light Dragoons rode into Fishkill from the east, passing the then relatively new Trinity Church, and drew up in review formation in front of this church. They are right along the side of this building. They remained mounted and at ease for nearly an hour before, from the west, a similar contingent of cavalry, Baylor's Pennsylvania Light Dragoons, appeared in escort of a coach. The coach and troopers had crossed the Hudson on Colden's old ferry, operated at the time by the Continental Army. The group drew to a halt in front of the church, and the occupants of the coach retired into the inn to warm their bones. The building in which the inn was located still stands across the street. This was the first visit to Fishkill by the President of the Continental Congress, John Hancock. He was on his way home after a stormy session of the Continental Congress and was to be escorted through Connecticut by Sheldon's Dragoons. For many years, this old Fishkill area, I say old Fishkill, including not just Fishkill, but East Fishkill, Beacon, and a good part of Wappingers, has been of prime interest to the Dutchess County Historical Society. This is not your first pilgrimage here. John Hancock, too, was in Fishkill for more than once, but the account of his first visit is the only one which research so far has revealed in any detail. Another president of the Continental Congress, John Jay, lived here, and this morning we visited the refuge of the Jay family. Washington was no stranger here, nor was Knox, nor Greene, or Putnam, Steuben, nor Lafayette. The basic story of the importance of the historic structures of this area is quite well known to all of us, even though new data is being covered even here. We have read before of the stirring times when Fishkill was capital, when the American dead were piled along Main Street after the Battle of White Plains, when the organizational meeting of the Society of Cincinnati were held at the Verplank home. We are familiar with and love our two old churches, the oldest standing Capitol buildings in New York State, Trinity, used also for a time as a hospital, and the old Dutch church, immortalized in James Fenimore Cooper's novel, The Spy. Near Trinity was Loudon's Press, where the state printing office was located, home of the New York Packet, the the most famous patriotic New York newspaper, and the post office. These are things you as historians know. My aim today is to leave you with some new ideas. To tell you briefly of Fishkill, the breadbasket of the Revolution. It is well known fact that the importance of Fishkill was largely a result of the fact that two roads crossed here, the most important north-south, east-west connections. It was close to the river and nestled in a fertile area, separated from the enemy by a mountain range, the passes of which were easily fortifiable. For many years, it has been known that Fishkill was important during the Revolution. It was known that supplies were stored here, and each of our revolutionary landmarks had little stories attached to them concerning incidents during the stay of Washington's army. The difficult position of the historian, however, has been to attempt to wade through a mass of seemingly uncorrelated data in an effort to establish some thread of a more complete story, an untold story. Archaeological and historical research has shown that these were not little incidents, but in fact part of a much larger and more relevant story. Fishkill was not important simply because Washington had some soldiers here. It was important because this was a supply depot. Through the quartermaster commissary departments, the supply groups were in many respects very precisely organized. The historian's job is made extremely difficult by the fact that few records which do exist have never been correlated, and the regulations of the Continental Army stripping officers of their military titles and doing away with command placements have placed these services in an almost semi-secret position. There was no such thing as a regular chain of command such as the Continental Army, and there was no regular force designated as quartermaster or commissary units. The men who performed duties for both departments were, for the most part, detached from regular units for duty with these departments. We know without hesitation that Fishkill was at least Continental headquarters for New York, but research already completed also shows that officers came as well from all surrounding states, those states comprising the Northern Department of the Continental Army. This, together with the fact that supplies were received and dispatched and from these same states, as well as statements made at the time, indicates that Fishkill was, at least for a time, also the Northern Departmental headquarters. As these men were the workers, so other units were assigned to guard the stores and simply camp in reserve. Such was the case at Massachusetts militia in 1777 and 1778. Although the quartermaster and commissary officers were the official commanders of the supply depot, the guard or reserve troops stationed here had their own commanders. Though nearly every general, at one time or another, had a headquarters in Fishkill or simply passed a few days here, few probably commanded at Fishkill for any greater period in time than the Massachusetts militia General Jonathan Ward, who was here in 1777 and 1778. Fishkill was a pretty busy community then. Wagons would have been seen bouncing along the rough and often muddy streets. Soldiers were constantly in the streets. Guards were stationed at strategic buildings which had been pressed into military use. Dispatch riders rode down Main Street announcing the news of the day, and boys may have been trying to fold the heavy rag paper sheets of the latest edition of Loudon's New York Packet. We might even have seen Sam Loudon standing in front of his print shop and post office, looking south for the Morning Post writer, while down at the Van Wyck home, an aide of Colonel Hughes was busy reading a directive to commissary officers, while a dozen secretaries copied it in longhand to be rushed to other posts. The blacksmith across the street from headquarters was occupied with a broken wagon axle, and the commissary foot might have been seen hurrying through the bustling storehouse and supply compound toward the Van Wyck home to see news about the cattle which should have received the day before. Down at the military village, the prisoners were being fed, and a small group of Massachusetts militiamen were putting new revived powder in the magazine. This, in a small part, was life would have been like at least on a good day, and good days were far and few between.
Second part, we're going to go by our town clerk, Rebecca Tompkins.
Probably not a soul in this building would be familiar with the Fishkill which existed during the Revolution, for this history is really yet to be written. You will not find the names of any of the important men in any of our local histories, for in essence the most important part of Fishkill's history has been forgotten. Had you been here then, however, you might have encountered Lieutenant Colonel Hugh Hughes of New York, Deputy Quartermaster General of the Continental Army, or Thomas Wicks, also Deputy Quartermaster General of the Continental Army. Perhaps you might have business with Major John Fisher of the New Jersey Battalion, Assistant Quartermaster General Nathaniel Green, or if you sought information on new uniforms, you would see Lieutenant David Brooks of the Pennsylvania Battalion, Assistant Clothier General of the Continental Army. You might obtain information on various other supplies from Major Francis Chandonnet of New Hampshire, Assistant Deputy Quartermaster General, or from Unday Hay, also an Assistant Deputy Quartermaster General and later State Agent. To get supplies, you would see Nathaniel Stevens, Deputy Commissary General of Issues. If you had business at the military village, you would see Tobias Van Zant, the Barrack Master. If you were ill and lucky enough to be sent to the General Hospital below the military village, you might be examined personally by Dr. John Cochran of Pennsylvania, Chief Physician and Chief Surgeon of the Continental Army. And the list goes on and on. Records show, for example, that in the spring of 1782, there were over 50 officers of the Continental Army alone supervising the quartermaster on commissary work at Fishkill. The returns of troops stationed here show that Fishkill was a most important muster point, probably since the main north-south and east-west roads cross here. At one time, nearly the entire Massachusetts County militia was here, comprising upwards of 30 regiments. Troops from Connecticut were here also, and Pennsylvania and New Jersey, as well as our own men from New York. Here as well were contingents of such famous regiments as Glover's Marblehead Fishermen and Baldwin's Massachusetts Foot, which figured so prominently in the defense of New York in 1776. We have several different descriptions of the military village, as Castelock called the camp, which served as a center of the military complex, ordered built by the New York Committee of Safety on November 8, 1776. Not one of these descriptions agrees with the other. Without getting too technical and time-consuming, it is suspected that the same thing applies here as with the half-dozen revolutionary maps existing of the area. The Erskine military maps were a source of considerable concern for nearly 4 years in excavation of the military village area, because of buildings being uncovered failed to agree with the maps. It was not until some 6 months ago, when a map of the area by DeWitt was found, that we were able to ascertain exactly what General Erskine was attempting to indicate. Let me explain. Surveyor General DeWitt shows on his map of 1780 2 rows of 5 buildings in the east-west line divided by a water trench, which essentially is what we found. Though our research indicates additional buildings, Erskine shows 2 buildings, 2 long structures, each facing each other in an east-west pattern, and no water trench. What Erskine did apparently was to indicate each set of 5 buildings as one single long structure. As you can see, something of this type could cause much confusion, just as Chastelluc's description of the military vision was likewise had been confusing. He described seeing well-made barracks, even having cellars. In 5 years of works, no barrack buildings with a cellar has been found. Archaeological research in the village reveals a substantial occupation through the entire war. It verifies that conditions in the camp were most assuredly as described by nearly every eyewitness. It was the same up and down the highlands. misery could only comfort misery. There was little to wear, nothing to eat, and little prospect for either. The men whose job it was to feed and clothe the fighting army came last. The pitiful, horrid suffering at Valley Forge is so quick to come to mind when we think of the dark days of the war, but it was worse here. In the cases in the parish hall, you can see buttons from their uniforms, musket balls, buckles from their shoes and stockings, and other items dug from the remains of the building in which they lived. At the site, a short distance down the post road, are mounds of bones, all that remains of their meals, and some of them have been picked apart by the starving men in an effort to get at the marrow. Was Valley Forge worse than here? What could be worse than the condition described by General Heath, who came nearly to tears as he watched his men march from a winter camp near Cold Spring across the frozen ground in their bare feet. His tears were not from pity, but in pride. And today we have not the time to think of men. We have not the time or desire to preserve where they became immortal. I cannot believe we no longer desire our children to be inspired to greatness. I cannot believe those magnificent ideals which inspired those men to march barefoot over the frozen ground have become obsolete. As many of you know, the Fishkill Historical Society is deeply concerned over the future of the historic Van Wyck Wharton House and the military complex adjacent, which served as a supply center and military post. It is our hope to sponsor a restoration reconstruction of this complex to preserve for future generations to value this neglected phase of our revolutionary heritage. Nowhere else in the country is there a quartermaster or commissary post of such importance better suited for this than at Fishkill. We are concerned for the future because of a lack of concern. That this area holds something so important and of such intrinsic value, demanding that it be protected, just does not seem to matter. We have in the past fought for those things which are the most vital assets this town possesses, often with only a handful of members, and we will continue to do so in the future, but we need the help of every person in this room. I leave you with a thought. Beauty is created only with the greatest difficulty and destroyed so easily. Allow those places we have visited today to be destroyed, and you will have lost not only your most valuable assets, but you will have cheated future generations of their heritage and scholars of the ability to know what really happened. Let us not have to bow our heads in shame that we allowed this to happen, content only to know where the blame lies. Let us find the time. Let us not forget what they were so willing to give all that they had for. Let us ensure an inspiration to the future that they might be willing at least do as much.
Well done, Rebecca Tompkins and Jackie Bardini. That speech was written in 1967. Those words were so powerful then, and they're still powerful now. The sacrifice was greater than Valley Forge in this area, and you're talking this was the epicenter of it. Assemblyman Beetham has a proclamation he'd like to read. Let's welcome him.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd be remiss if I did not mention that also my predecessor is here, Kieran. Thanks for being here. He's a veteran himself. Fishkill, out of all my towns, has taken a stance and a point to remember our heroes from every single war across our history. I have done countless road dedication signs with you, working on funding to erect even more monuments across this great town. I want to commend everyone from the supervisor to the board members, the clerk, all the veterans organizations here for your time and efforts to remembering our history. It's important that we do that. And now the next step is this sign and monument right over here. remembering the contributions of our American Revolutionary heroes, but the work that the Melzinga chapter did years ago, over a century ago, really. So, to the town of Fishkill, thank you so much for your dedication to remembering our history. We commend you for your efforts. This is to you and the entire town. And I look forward to supporting any efforts that you do in the future to remember our history. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of our veterans in the audience and anyone that is a descendant of a Revolutionary War member. Thank you, everyone.
So the Assemblyman was being very kind. He's working with me and Councilman Rye on a monument to James Bailey, who forged George Washington's sword as depicted crossing the Delaware. He was able to secure, was it $75,000? $80,000 to help beautify the area. So yes, kudos to the Assemblyman for bringing something to the town of Fishkill. We haven't gotten anything for decades. We appreciate that. And this is not our first attempt at this. The town, about 5 years ago, we put up the Chief Nimham statue that's on the 82-52 intersection. As I described, we're working on the John Bailey Monument, which is going to go between the police department and the rec center. That should be done in about 6 months. We're doing this today. We've dedicated, from all wars, we dedicated county roads with former county executive Marcus Molinaro to 3 combat veterans who were killed in Vietnam. So the town of Fishkill is on point, honoring our history and our veterans. Veterans Memorial Park, located between the police station and the rec center. Councilman Ryan just reminded that. Please come visit it. So next up will be Nick from Senator Rollison's office.
Hello. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everybody. So my name is Nico. I'm here from New York State Senator Rob Rollison's office. Unfortunately, he could not be here today, but that is why he likes to send somebody like myself and something such as this for such an occasion. We really want to give a shout out for the dedication, for the rededication of the sign to the Daughters of the American Revolution. We want to present this certificate to the town of Fishkill, here to Ozzy, congratulating him on this rededication.
Okay, so before we unveil the sign, I just want to read what the original marker said, and it's pretty self-explanatory. So it's a beautiful Quincy marble stone out of Massachusetts. This quarry doesn't exist anymore. The current monument is at the Van Wyck House. I urge everybody to go take a look at it. It's a beautiful stone with 13 stars representing the 13 colonies. And it's dedicated from 1776 to 1783. And in it, let's hear what it is written on the stone. In grateful remembrance of the brave men who gave their lives for their country during the American Revolution. More important, and whose remains repose in the adjoining field. Repose who are at the adjoining field. The stone was erected by the Melzinga chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution on October 14th, 1897. And going into the 250th anniversary of this great country's birth, the town of Fishkill is trying to recognize all our historical events. We're creating a passport that we're going to get hand-delivered to each resident of the town of Fishkill. Has about 15 historical places where we want them to go, mark the date and time, and we designed a nice 250th anniversary town of Fishkill pin that they would receive once they complete the passport. With further ado, this is going to be a temporary sign. We're going to do a 3-panel bigger one. It takes like 6 months to design, and it will contain a Betsy Ross flag in the near future. But without further ado, here is our new plaque. So the sign is pretty self-explanatory. It has the picture of the original monument that was at this intersection for over 100 years. It's got a basic map of the Army encampment in the area. It's got the original 1897 Town Board resolution marking the site, and it's got the most recent 2025 Town Board resolution affirming that it was here at that time period. Now we'll have our Putnam and Lakeside Choral give one song, and here we go. Ladies, gentlemen.
is your land, this land is my land. California to the New York Island, the forest to the upstream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that New York highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. For you and me. Oh, beautiful, for spacious skies warm and the waves of rain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. America,
Thanks again to the Putnam and Lakeside Charles. That was awesome. Is there anybody else who'd like to say anything before we wrap this up? This was a great event. I thank you all for coming. The 250th anniversary is going to be great for America to remind us of what everybody sacrificed through history to be here. Again, thank you all for coming. God bless America, and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.